Hola, Internet amigos. Today's date is the 9th of March, 2025. It's 1:53 p.m. We need to talk about race hate vilification legislation and the hysteria surrounding it. There is no one more expert on this than me after 3 years in jail.
A Maylands man has pleaded not guilty to inciting racism after posting comments on YouTube. 39-year-old Brendan O'Connell is the first person to be arrested under WA's racial vilification laws.
This is actually very big, bigger than you think. They haven't got a hope in hell. Seriously.
O'Connell is accused of making comments in a video that could cause animosity towards the Jewish community.
There was extra security in the courtroom for the sentencing. After being told he would serve 3 years in jail, O'Connell yelled out, "That's a holiday camp compared to Gaza."
And doing a directions hearing on are Jews or race or ethnicity and so on.
But look, if this was any other issue, I think I'd sway the judge, honestly. But of course, Judaism Discovered, my favourite book. This book I would prefer to photocopy directly, but I don't have time. I'm just going to give it to her, which is a shame. Hopefully she'll peruse it a bit. Maybe she'll get her own copy. Don't know. We will see. Great book. I've also just throwing in there Hoffman contra the Kazas. These are the internet debates of Michael Hoffman II. Again, just to give her an idea of the Talmudic mindset, where Hoffman canes some Jew debater bum. Very good. Another Hoffman. The role of the merchants of venom. The trend towards shadow play and the resistance to Judaism and Zionism. Again, to give the judge an idea of the mindset of who wrote these laws. And one of my personal phrases, again by Hoffman, one of my favourite authors on this religious aspects of this, the Israeli Holocaust against the Palestinians. A chronicle of war crimes and atrocities against people judged less than human by the US government and media. Or we should say the US Jewish government and media. Again, hardly, I was thinking of putting in stuff like the Israeli Lobby by John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt, but look, I've got to try and stick at least nominally to the issue at hand.
I'm going to go through my UN refugee claim document, which has every detail in there. You will never get information better than this anywhere. Let's stop the hysteria. Number one, the legislation is never going in after they just cut $400 million out of $5 billion, so drop in the ocean, relatively speaking, to Columbia University. I'm going to tell you, I agree with it. I think they should ban all protests on this issue. Just ban it all. Of course, they can't, but I'll tell you why that would be beneficial, because then we could have adult conversations with people who lobby. Remember, I learned from Jewish Power, after studying Jewish Power and the political Zionist movement and the Hufjuden of Europe for the last, what would we say, 25 years in total, since 95, when I first started getting interested, when I watched Yitzhak Rabin assassinated in Israel, Bibi is a murderer. Ever since that time, I can tell you exactly how to win. All protest is nothing but self-indulgent bullshit narcissism. Jews don't protest. They organize protest. The political Zionist movement organizes the protests for the Goy and the Gentiles, so they'll show themselves, they'll get to let off some steam and make fools of themselves, and they'll tell them, don't mention Jewish racial or religious supremacists. Though I know Jewish groups that have gone after this, but you never see them highlighted, ever. Green left types, who to their credit absolutely went after this, they're never on the TV, and we've got the idiots of Linda Sarsour. Let's now talk about that, and we'll go into it. But before that, let's look at something else. Let me show you something. This is very important. US-Hamas talks. The United States is talking directly with Hamas. That's big. That never happens. Never. Trust me, there will be a base in Gaza and Bibi's going to get his ass handed to him eventually. But just remember that. US-Hamas talks. I've never seen that before, ever. Bypassing Bibi to go straight to talks. Either it's an act, I don't think it is, but if it could be, you should consider that. But I actually think it's quite real what they've done then. Now let's quickly watch a little bit of Trump administration cancels $400 million in Columbia University funding. Remember, there is no one more briefed up on this. I did an excellent briefing notes to my lawyer, John Bowger, who presented the directions hearing beautifully, absolutely beautifully on this issue. And we would have won that. Judge McCann actually said some very interesting things have been raised here today, and he had to leave to go to chambers to make up his mind. John Bowger turned to me and said, my God, I think we're going to win. And I said, no. What he had to do was raise the issue with inadmissible opinion evidence, meaning Rabbi David Freilich, who was live from Jerusalem, from the Israeli Supreme Court building with the big pyramid on top, and Professor Andrew Marcus, Professor of Jewish Civilization Studies. They couldn't have them as witnesses because that was inadmissible opinion evidence. It was just their opinion about what other people think. And Badger said, they can't appear. And I said, no, I want to go to trial, John. Let them appear. Of course, always believing I would be able to present my case and show all this material on the record, the espionage, all the rest, and they just laughed at me and just destroyed me in the court and just refused. And even my Anthony Ayers, the prosecutor, was assisting me trying to help, and he was disgusted with how things went on. Trust me, I had a lot of supporters in there, a lot of supporters. But I was a babe in the woods. I was just getting slaughtered. I had no idea. And I was warned before I went by someone whose family were in the building trade, big buildings. And they said, Brendan, this place is owned. You need to just back out, say you're sorry. They're clearly giving indications they want you to back out. They don't want a trial. Just say you're sorry, plead guilty. It'll be a little minor magistrate's court, because the then prosecutor, the head of the DPP was Justin Wally. They replaced Alan Troy. I still remember their names. Alan Troy was a piece of garbage. I could tell you stories about him. But Justin Wally said, we will consider taking this case back to the magistrate's court. I could talk for hours on this, but the revisionist movement, of course, won't touch it because they work for the same people. You don't get how controlled the whole arranged opposition really is in this online world. But when we went in, we could have had it down. Anthony Ayers said to me over 3 years later when I saw him outside the court, and Anthony turned to me and said, Brendan, you're still alive. And I said, hey, Anthony, yeah. And he invited me out for a wine. I had a wine with him, and he said, Brendan, they should never have been on the legislation. That's a quote. I performed miracles, not having a clue what the hell I was doing. And here we are today. Maybe that was a good thing, because if I knew what I was getting into, I probably would never have done it. Let's have a quick listen to the Trump administration cancels $400 million in Columbia University funding. I think this is wonderful news. I want all protests banned. It's not going to happen. I want all protests banned. America will never get hate speech legislation. It is impossible to put in hate speech legislation. Impossible. You can't be done. But in places like Australia, I still get the hysterical, oh my God, hate speech legislation. It's so easy to get around. All right, it's a lie, it's a fraud. They can't enforce it, and I'll tell you how. I mean, all you have to do is say, yeah, I'll raise Brendan O'Connell in Israeli espionage and Telpiot program and Unit 8200. That'll be the end. Police are never going to prosecute you. All right, but they always get these Nazis who are always drug traffickers, drug dealers, and wife beaters, and they're out there on steroids, raising the fist going, Sieg Heil, Heil Hitler. They all work for the same people every time. Let's watch this.
We have breaking news. The Trump administration canceling $400 million worth of grants and contracts for Columbia University, citing what they call consistent inaction in the face of, quote, persistent harassment of Jewish students. NBC's Aaron Gilchrist is reporting from D.C. What have we heard? Has Columbia responded?
Columbia has responded. We reached out to them for a response to this action that's coming from the Department of Education, the DOJ as well. The university says that it's looking at the announcement at this point. We can show you part of the statement we received from them that says we are reviewing the announcement from the federal agencies and pledge to work with the federal government to restore Columbia's federal funding. We take Columbia's legal obligations seriously and understand how seriously this announcement is, and are committed to combating anti-Semitism and ensuring the safety and well-being of our students, faculty, and staff. There was part of the statement from these agencies, the Department of Education and others, that said for too long Columbia has abandoned its obligation to Jewish students, and today we demonstrate to Columbia and other universities that we will not tolerate their appalling inaction any longer. That's from the new Education Secretary, Linda McMahon. And you might remember that in the days...
Now, Linda McMahon, of course, Vince McMahon's wife, that low-life piece of sexual deviant garbage. Remember, who runs the World Wrestling Federation, owns it? That would be Ari Emanuel, Israeli intelligence royalty. Ari Emanuel, Trump's super agent. He's Joe Rogan's super agent and head of the UFC. Okay? Alex Jones is involved with them. All of them, all linked around Ari Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel's his brother. Rahm Emanuel was Barack Obama's chief of staff. Maybe someone might want to mention on the left, got to get Trump. You might want to talk about that. They say nothing. This is how controlled it is. I mean, black and white control, total control.
the Hamas attack on Israel, we did see these pro-Palestinian demonstrations at universities, different universities around the country. Columbia University obviously was one where we saw many demonstrations. And since then, there's been a joint task force stood up in the federal government that was designed to combat anti-Semitism. And there have been investigations of different universities.
Ironically, the greatest anti-Semites in history is Likud and Bibi and his blonde-haired, blue-eyed pretend Russian Jews.
Columbia at different points in time during the Biden administration, as a matter of fact. And now we have this action coming from the Trump administration, Chris, where we've now seen about $400 million in federal grants and contracts that are being canceled by this administration because it doesn't believe that Columbia has done enough to protect Jewish students. And so we'll be listening.
All right, Jewish activists are running this. This is an Israeli-run operation. Obviously, if they were for real, particularly with all the Muslim students, they would be talking about what? National security issues and going after Israel, showing the American public that Israel, particularly Likud and what you call ultra-right wing, which is not really Chabad Lubavitch, who's best friends with the president, allegedly still, well, remains to be seen. I've heard a few positive signs about that. And Jared Kushner, who lives at 666 Fifth Avenue, New York, that group go after them as a national security risk. The endless things. Hey, America, did you know Israeli companies who are in bed with Russia and China on the Belt and Road and the multipolar world order are running your critical infrastructure? There you go. Problem solved. That would be the end of Likud and Israel. Not a peep. And we went out there and spoke directly to these groups because they're all run by hardcore Zionist Jewish power. They're all assets. Very few. I've met a few green left radicals, Jewish students, who actually were really good. They even shook my hand. Think about it. But you never see them put anywhere on the internet. I've never found them. You only get the usual suspects. And the Palestinian activists are fantastic. They agree with you. Thank you, Brendan. They hug you. And they're just being handled by the same mob. And let me explain why and how. Remember, this is about controlling international Jewry. They need to control Jewish communities around the world. They have to constantly keep them in fear with Holocaust narratives. The Nazis are coming. Every time there's a neo-Nazi movement, guess who? Same people. Let me give you a couple of examples. Let's do Control F. Nazi. This is from my UN document. It's filled with. Note that recently a man on the FBI 10 most wanted list was found in Israel. Oh really? Ku Klux Klan, found in Israel. What is intriguing is that he was the former head of a chapter of the Ku Klux Klan in the US. Israel has some of the most tightly controlled borders in the world. How can this be? Why would someone espousing notions of white Aryan supremacism with a hardcore hatred of Jews as a racial enemy of mankind hide out in Israel? Apparently he stated that he thought Israel would be, quote, the last place anyone would look, end quote. The man, Mickey Mayon, is Jewish. Arrested KKK man turned over to Israeli police by friend. Fancy that. I've got a whole list in here. This is James Mitchell Rosenberg. This is by Jeffrey Kaplan, Helene Lowe. The Cultic Milieu, Oppositional Subcultures in an Age of Globalization. A case which has been compared to the Bullock case was that of James Mitchell Rosenberg, aka Jim Anderson, a true American. Rosenberg Anderson was an undercover operative of the ADL. These are not my words. This is the book's words written by a Jewish community member, who acted as an agent provocateur, posing as a right-wing paramilitary extremist. He appeared at this role as part of a TV documentary entitled, quote, Armies of the Right, which premiered in 1981. Rosenberg was arrested that same year in New York for carrying an unregistered firearm in public view. Sounds like a certain Proud Boys. In 1984, ADL fact-finding director Erwin Sewell identified Rosenberg as an ADL operative, and I've got a whole list of them there in this incredible report. You can find it easily. Just do Control F. And most of my stuff is from the Israeli press, is constantly. Now, here's why they need this, quote, anti-Semitism, which is a ridiculous word because Arabs are Semitic, but we'll call it anti-Jewish hatred. How do you get Jews internationally to support Israel, a state which they all really hate and know is causing them no end of trouble? This is from the editor of Sharon. You've heard me mention it 1,000 times, and I will mention it 1,000 times more. It's the editorial article in the official newspaper of the governing Labour Party, Davar, Israel, July 11th, 1952. and this is a quote, okay? "I shall not be ashamed to confess that if I had the power, as I have the will, I would select a score of efficient young men, intelligent, decent, devoted to our ideal, and burning with desire to help redeem Jews. And I would send them to the countries where Jews are absorbed in sinful self-satisfaction. The task of these young men would be to disguise themselves as non-Jews and plague these Jews with anti-Semitic slogans such as bloody Jew, Jews go to Palestine, and similar intimacies. I can vouch that the results in terms of considerable immigration to Israel from these countries would be 10,000 times larger than the results brought by thousands of emissaries who have been for decades preaching to deaf ears." Okay, this is the core. It's all run by ADL, sections of the FBI, and of course, Israeli military intelligence, private contractors, crisis actors, and so on. That's who run all these neo-Nazis. If you're involved in the white nationalist movement, that's who you work for. Every single time. Remember Adam Green? Remember? Pushed on me by guess who? Fred Smith's nephew. Fred Smith, Skull and Bones, FedEx. He seems like a decent chap. But his nephew, Joseph Davies, kept associating me with Adam Green and all these people. And finally said to me, I said, stop associating with him. He's trying to push Adolf Hitler. He's hanging around with freaking white nationalists. And finally, Joseph Davies goes, yeah, you're right. He's a dickhead. I said, oh, what, you just worked that out, Joseph? Stop associating me with him. And there he is with the clown show knuckleheads, you know, Jews rape kids blimp, and he's laughing about it. Then finally someone, and it's those guys off Red Ice Radio, say, man, how does this make us look, you idiot? How does it make us look? Well, it makes you look like the fucking fools and the plants that you are. That's what Adam Green is. You seriously think he doesn't know this? You seriously think he didn't get pushed by freaking good old Alex Jones? Pushed Adam Green non-stop. Had him on his show 3 times. Why? Because they wanted to break off all those people in the comment section of the of Alex Jones's section, break them off and get them to run over to have separate sites. That's why they build Rumble. That's why they build BitChute. It's to break up and polarize people into an echo chamber. And Adam Green was part of it. And he never set foot outside again after that. Never set foot outside again. Because now he's making money. He's getting paid by people who are involved with originally Steve Bannon. And what was he doing over there in Rome, as Matthew North, who later committed suicide, was telling us? Not only does he walk into Israel, just walk straight in and walk straight out, interviewing literal Nazis, he's suddenly, with Jake Morphonius, the LDS church, the Mormon church, he's roaming around over there in Rome in 2016 with his yoga instructor girlfriend, just like, you know, Alex Jones's yoga instructor prostitute girlfriend, which I find fascinating. He didn't tell anyone. People said, "Oh, I thought you had no money, Adam. What were you doing in Rome with you?" "Oh, she was at a yoga convention. She paid for it." You weren't there sitting down with Steve Bannon and Alexander Dugin or anything, were you? Think about who these people are hanging around with. Think about, I mean, I don't know about you, but if I found out Fred Smith, Skull and Bones, Joseph Davies was, you know, getting us all together, I'd be talking about it. Not one of them said a word. Not one said a word. And I was introduced to all those people, Jeremy Rothschild, Greg McCarran, Adam Green, by none other than Joseph Davies' nephew, and I'm getting private photos sent to me. Hello? And I don't believe Fred Smith for a second is involved in the white nationalist movement, but someone might have been trying to discredit me when I'm applying for a UN refugee document. At the same time, I'm getting invited out by Gloria, whose brother trains Royal Malay Military Intelligence, getting invited out to meet oil and gas executives and consular officials at the wet deck in Kuala Lumpur. And I refused to go. I said, "Do I have to get dressed up?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Yeah, I'm not going. I don't like it. Just come to me and give me the contract, pay me $3.8 million and we're done." Very simple. I don't know why this is so complicated. But anyway, that's what I mean. They create anti-Semitic movements. Does anyone seriously believe, how did Jewish power get powerful? Simple question. Do Jews protest? They organize a lot of protests, but do they protest? No. No, they have their little things. They lobby. They lobby. They engage in politics. They subvert. They penetrate. Okay? Do you understand? So I keep telling you, I learned by studying the best So they want to penetrate a church, whether it's a small or a large church. Say the political Zionist movement and all the drug traffickers, Israeli Russian drug traffickers, want to penetrate into the evangelical movement. They've already got a soft bed landing. They've already got a pre-prepared ground to grow the tares, the weeds in the wheat field, you see. So they get a beautiful looking woman. She's an accountant and she goes, "Hi, I'm a Christian," whereas she's an Orthodox Jewess playing Christian. Or maybe she's converted to Christianity, but see, the Sabbatean cult, Sabbatean Frankist cult, is above forms. She's just part of a cult. And she can walk in, maybe they psychologically profiled the priest, and he's married with a couple of kids, and they say, "Oh, look, it's so wonderful. I'm an accountant. Can I help with your books?" And pretty soon, all these donations start pouring in, and the priest's going, "Wow, look at all this money." Then she's having an affair with the priest. Then she's put a sliver of crystal methamphetamine into his scotch, and suddenly he's looking at 14-year-old schoolgirls online, or she's brought in a young man, or they've gone on a trip to Israel to visit the unholy land, and he's been compromised over there. Whichever way you look at it, suddenly his church now has a $250,000 studio. Don't they, Rick Wiles? Like Rick Wiles got after he did all his business and stopped talking about the Telpiot program and other things. And then lo and behold, they've got a $250,000 studio. They're getting all this publicity. Millions of dollars are rolling in from the drug money being laundered through, because remember, it's a church. You don't have to declare where the money came from. You just say, "A humble servant of the church, a donor, has donated this $100,000 in cash." That's it. You don't have to declare the tax. It's one of the biggest rorts out there, and a huge story about the billions of drug money that's being laundered through that huge evangelical movement with 40,000 seat stadiums. It's a huge thing, whether it's meme coins or these evangelical churches. Look at them, or the likes of what's his face, hanging with Defense Intelligence Agency good old General what's his face is. I've even forgotten his name. With the guy with the Illuminati face. I mean, it's absurd. But anyway, that's why I'm all for. They're not going to ban anything. It's a furphy. It's horseshit. This is about scaring Jewish communities into supporting Israel. That's all it's about. They organize these rallies. They intimidate the Jews. How intimidated do you think I felt in Mexico? One of the most racist places I've ever been in. Personally, I'm sure there's worse, but I've felt it. Not just for being a foreigner, but for being white. Now imagine how they're feeling. You see, that's how you keep support for the Israeli state, push Holocaust narratives, and keep support, even though everyone hates your guts, particularly Netanyahu and Likud. Mr. Malachowski from Lithuania is a Poland. No one will admit to him. So with these things in mind, now do you see why they set up tents? Has anything ever changed with a protest? Ever? You lobby politically. Protests are for suckers. Suckers protest. Spicy pumpkin lady. It's therapy to make themselves feel better about themselves because they feel powerless. So what do? They might actually get to a point of optimal frustration if they don't have an outlet, and they might actually start organizing like a Mary Silva and attend, a Republican convention and expose the whole thing. So instead of that, you give them safe places to vent their bullshit. And then they all jerk off and say, "Well, I've done my bit." The biggest waste of time of protests ever. Suckers protests, goy protests, cattle protests, suckers protests. Real men and real women lobby politically and become involved in politics. Learn from the best. Stop complaining about the damn Jews. All the Jews did this. They made you do nothing. They just exposed what a slave mentality you have. You should be thoroughly ashamed of yourself. And you could start organizing. Where's the money? Why don't we have Jews, Christians, and Muslims sitting down in a big convention right now, talking about these big issues we talk about? Oh, no, we can't have that. No. Heaven forfend. That might actually solve something. The aim is to put you into a prearranged political arena, get you cheering for a team, and your ass is firmly on the bleachers. You're sitting down and you are not interfering in the game of politics. As Kissinger said, you've got no business getting involved in politics. You're not qualified. Maybe he's right. Sometimes I look at that, maybe he's right. Because you're so easily suckered, present company on Patreon excluded. Let's now go to my excellent UN document. Excellent document. Let's scroll all the way to the top. This document is so easy to navigate, and people say, wow, that is so full of information. That's crazy. I'm so proud of this document. I got 20,000 US dollars sent to me. I gave $4,000 to the clown show, but that enabled me to just go offline and do nothing but create this document. This is my last man standing. Whatever happens, at least I have my life down on this piece of paper. Okay, you can just navigate down to this page. There's the main index. It's so easy. And you can go down to, I love this document. I feel so, Word is very powerful too, Microsoft Word, if you want to learn how to use it. When you read this, remember, this was done in 2012 from a high security prison. And there's a thing called KeyWix, which is like Wikipedia, but it's on a hard drive in the education center. And that's where I managed to find a lot of material and put into the document. When they found out about it, they banned that KeyWix from the prison. See, they just can't bear prisoners educating themselves. I can tell you a lot about prison. A lot. Civilian military contracts, variant, 2012. You'd think a journalist like Whitley Webb might want to interview me. Imagine never receiving. Hamid Fadaroli from Iran Press TV. I go to Iran, they're going to do this big documentary. It never happens. And he said, they're not giving me any money, Brendan. I don't know what's going on. They probably spent all the money and embezzled it. So corrupt. Fuck Iran. You have no idea about Iran. I told you, the only real one there is former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. The rest of them are just off to Chatham House. They're off. They've all got green cards. They've lived all their lives. Their kids are freaking born and bred in America, and they're all attending, Scottish universities and hanging with Jack Straw and Lord Levi. Work it out. So fake. It's unbelievable. Zionist control United States foreign and domestic policy, Jewish founding of the Soviet state and use of sayings in past. I mean, this was 2012 from a maximum security prison, ladies and gentlemen. All right, commentary on racial vilification legislation. Let's read some of it. You want to know how it works? Read this. I'm giving you, there is nothing to fear with racial vilification legislation. I say bring it in, scare all the bullshit artists off from the clowns and the Nazis, and they'll all be gone. There'll only be the adults who can talk and have conversations left. It's beautiful because the essence of race hate legislation is this. In an attempt not to stifle debate in the public interest, keyword, in the public interest, newsworthy. These are the legal terms that you will see in this document. Newsworthy in the public interest. All you have to do is be polite. Here's another key word. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. That's why free speech is not a defense. Frederick Tobin would never tell you this. He knew that, but he wouldn't tell you. All right? The key is you don't worship Adolf Hitler. The whole point of the legislation in the Hansard debate said we are trying to prevent the rise of Nazi-like political parties, National Socialist, race-based political parties. That's all that is for. So as long as you are not involved in any of these movements, you are trying, you might lose your temper. And it even says in the debate, we don't, just because someone loses their temper, we don't want to involve them in the legislation. We want to allow reasonable speech, whatever that is, to take place. So that's why I'm not even into free speech, because I prefer a hardcore tyranny, which then tells you you're in a tyranny now, pick up your guns. So there's no ambiguity. You know you're in tyranny. Or you can get rid of all the shit brains, all the crisis actors, all the Adam Greens, all the Patrick Littles, all the, expel the Jews by 22 people. You'll get rid of them and you will have reasoned adult conversations. Let me read. I wrote this in. So even back then, this is from Book of James. Forgot which Bible. I don't think it's the King James. Sorry, Tex. Likewise, the tongue. This is James 3:5. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the whole course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. I know this well. My tongue's got me in a lot of trouble. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and creatures of the sea are being tamed and have been tamed by man, but no man can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. Killing someone always starts with, I'm going to kill you. Matthew 23:33. You snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell? That's talking of the religious and political elite of his day, rabbinic Pharisaic Judaism. Christ called them children of hell, sons of your father, the devil. He was talking about the political and religious elite. Sons of your father, therefore ye compass sea and land to make one proselyte, then make, that means one convert to Judaism, and then you make him twice the child of hell as yourselves. Wow. Jesus got a tongue on him and a whip of cords, hasn't he? So these are words that Jesus spoke to the religious and political elite of his day. He would have come under the legislation, notwithstanding he committed acts of violence by whipping the money changers from the temple square. Conversely, I am not entirely against the legislation in principle, as evidenced by the inclusion of the passage from James in the New Testament. Polite dialogue wins over yelling and screaming. What I fear is the abuse of the legislation, which is inevitable, it appears, with who is pushing it. Again, it's intent. It's all about intent. A knife is not illegal, okay? But say I have a knife in my bag and I'm a chef and I'm on my way to work. That's fine. Knives are not illegal. But if I'm a neo-Nazi thug on my way to the Jewish synagogue and I have a knife on my person, it's intent. So it's the person, their background, from which a jury would develop their intent. Do you understand? It's not about the knife. It's not about truth. That's not a defense. Saying, hey, knives aren't illegal, it's the intent of what you're doing with the knife. That is the essence of the legislation. So your intent must be to promote peace. It must be in the public interest. It must be based on a discussion of historical events. You need to clarify that. And it must be newsworthy. That's all you have to do. Be polite. In fact, it says in the analysis of the legislation, so far so good, that's the name of the analysis, so far so good. It says, we're actually worried, though, that you could get an academic, give an academic paper detailing why killing all the Jews is good, why the Holocaust was good, as long as they do it politely. And that's what they said in the critique of the legislation could be a problem, that you might get a polite Nazi who's worked it out, get rid of their Nazi tattoos and stop putting them on their forehead and start creating trouble. Well, so what? That's easy to work out. They're all psychoanalyzed, data analytic, and they put their stuff everywhere. You can identify those people easily. This is why I'm not against the legislation. I say bring it on. Every half will be removed from online, and the Linda Sarsour morons of this world might get a clue. You know Linda Sarsour, this nutcase. Oh, women's rights, so I wear my veil. It's like, you know, whatever. But, you know, I have heard some of her speeches. She's hardcore. She calls out the Jewish activists and said, why don't you call out your own racial and religious supremacism? Ever since that speech, what, about 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago? I haven't seen it, but it's probably out there. You just can't find it. But she has done some excellent speeches. Now, imagine if Linda Sarsour, who I do believe, I've forgotten your name, on my Patreon, actually ambushed with this information. She was tired, he said. She was tired because she just got off a plane, but she thanked him for the information and walked off. Now, imagine if Linda Sarsour started talking national security. Imagine. I've never received a dime from these people. Individuals, including Jews and Muslims, have thanked me, hugged me, and shook my hand. But none of the organisers will ever go near me because they're all owned and operated entities. That's why. Old Linda Sarsour. What a bunch of scammers they are. We go back here. There's a lot of good stuff. This was one of the charges. I had one count of this. This was Stanley Elliott Keyser. Remember, I offended him. I'm offended. He said, any person, this is section 80B, conduct likely to racially harass. Any person who engages in any conduct, otherwise than in private, that is likely to harass a racial group or a person as a member of a racial group is guilty of a crime and is liable to imprisonment for 3 years. And in the extracts, it talks about racially harass is to cause offence. Well, I'm at a political rally. Of course, someone's going to get offended. And we could talk for hours about the stuff, but this is the absurdity of the legislation. 80B, conduct likely to racially harass. And it goes into heavy detail criticising this part of the legislation as it's just not focused enough. See, they wanted to use my case to set some precedences. So they weren't necessarily out to get me. In fact, they were clearly backing off. The police were coming, telling me what a genius I was. I said, yeah, you threatened me last week, effer. All the rest. And I go deeply into all this. These are from the transcripts. This is gold, this stuff. Mr. Ayres, you know, well, I felt very threatened. You're at a political rally, dickhead. And on and on and on. I think it's best because these are a lot of pages here. A lot of pages. But I thoroughly critiqued the legislation, and we would have got to the High Court had it not been so politically charged. And of course, I would have crowed like a rooster, and they didn't want that. They didn't want to give me any more publicity. But Professor Shlomo Sand, The Invention of the Jewish People, because within here also is all the data I used and the actual write-up from John Bowger on the directions hearing on Are Jews erased? Which of course is a ridiculous concept. It's like saying there's a Catholic race. We'll go to the Vatican, we'll all learn ancient Latin and revive the old language, and then we'll get nuclear weapons, we'll get an air force, and we'll start killing off all the Italian Buddhists who've lived in Italy for 50 generations and claim Swahili witch doctors and claim we're part of the Catholic race. It'd be absurd, but that is exactly what they did. And as Professor Shlomo Sand says in the book, The Invention of the Jewish People, this is not about group identity, which Steve Lieblich tried to put across. Any group. So they're trying to say identifiable groups, which could be a bikie, could be a politician. It's very dangerous legislation when it leads into that, which of course they've tried to stop, and they have stopped so far. But as the great Professor Israel Shahak says, we cannot combat anti-Semitism till we address Jewish racism and chauvinism. And Professor Shlomo Sand says the same thing in The Invention of the Jewish People, which you must read. And now the last, perhaps the hardest question of them all, to what extent is the Jewish Israeli society willing to discard the deeply embedded image of the chosen people and cease isolating itself in the name of a fanciful history of dubious biology and excluding the other from its midst? Just remember the Jewish Old Testament, the Tanakh, which says even the alien amongst you, the foreigner, is equal before you in the law. Yeah, I'll give you 500 quotes from the Old Testament. The violence in the Old Testament is in context. They were getting slaughtered by the tribes. Tribes were practicing child sacrifice, abortion, and all the rest. There's a context, which they take out of context themselves and use it to justify killing the Palestinians, men, women, and children. You must read Professor Shlomo Sand, The Invention of the Jewish People. Oh, here's something funny. Before we wind this up, this is funny. This is it. I'm just reading this again. This is so detailed. I'm so proud of this. This is my Moon Virgo conjunct Pluto coming into my need for coffee. I actually put this in the High Court appeal, which I reckon would have helped get it in. They wouldn't give me any coffee. I'm a heavy coffee drinker. The whole day, I couldn't even think. He said, no, you're not having coffee. No, no. I was kept in the dungeon, the bail room. In America, the jury stays inside and you're allowed to walk around on bail, but nope, they locked me up. I was kept in a dungeon bail room. They would not give me coffee without permission from the judge, and he considered it a joke. This is the accused, me. Your Honor, what are my rights with? I'm having a lot of trouble concentrating. Can I call Mr. Keyser back tomorrow? And he says something that's rubbed out, and I say that's good. They mess with the transcript totally. And this is Wisby. No, this is me saying to the judge, let the record show, Your Honor, I need to think clearly. I need coffee, but I understand that's not going to happen. They completely removed his comments because they knew this was challengeable in an appeal. When you're presenting yourself, right, you need coffee, you need... I said, I have a wheat intolerance. Can I please have some? Nope, nope, nope. Again, that was a good High Court thing. And Wisby says, well, I don't think the record will show you need coffee. The record will show you said you need coffee. And eventually Anthony Ayres said, can this man please have a coffee? Anthony Ayres was disgusted. I actually liked Anthony, but there was a lot of problems that went on after that. So I hope this helps you understand that when you see, and finally, when you see Donald Trump talk about, I hope he takes away all their freaking funding. I hope they get rid of all these dickhead protesters, dumb cattle, goy, fools, children protest. All right, and you'll find the same people organizing these stupid protests which do nothing but create animosity, hatred, make Jewish communities unsettled. Why don't these people save their money, or the money they get from all these outside sources, half of them are drug trafficking on all sides, and go and spend their money on a huge conference, demand Mel Gibson put some money up, and have a huge conference on peace in the Middle East and Israel as a secular state. Demand it now. Get rid of, I say bring on all race hate legislation, beautiful. Then we can have adult conversations, organize adult meetings, stop all these wars, and then you can expose Israel as a national security threat, okay? And stealing everyone's money. And you can put up all the comments of the rabbis, get together with Jewish communities, Jewish groups, Muslim groups, solve the problem, bring peace, stop the death and destruction. How easy can it be? I truly thought when I went through with this 15 years ago that this is what would happen, and not a thing has happened. Such is the power of control, when they can pour billions of dollars into running every single, whenever you see a grassroots movement, they're astroturfed. You see them on the TV, you see them on YouTube, they're astroturfed. Nobody who's organic gets a run. Look at the brilliance of Mary Silva. Look at Lee's incredible stuff. Not a peep. Not a peep. Not a peep. They have total control over the internet. They're paying everybody off. You need to get angry about that. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk again very, very, very soon. Okay. Let me press stop. I hope that helped you a little bit. Right? That UN document is 100 megabytes. It's gold. You need to download it. Keep a copy. Maybe send one to Whitney Webb. Maybe the journalist Whitney Webb will ask for an interview. Maybe do a story. Talk soon. F. Scott Fitzgerald, quote, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. One should, for example, be able to see that things are hopeless and yet be determined to make them otherwise. This philosophy fitted on to my early adult life when I saw the improbable, the implausible, often the impossible, come true."
What is our common bond truly? Freedom. Freedom. Without freedom, you can't be a Christian no matter what denomination you belong to. You can't be a Buddhist. You can't own a donut shop. You can't drive from here to Oregon. You can't be an American because that's what it's all about, and that's the only thing that it's all about, nothing else. Nothing else. It's about freedom.